What happens when the owner of a restaurant chain walks in as a trainee and ends up watching a new hostess cry behind the counter over something she didn't do? Garrett Nolan had built his name through smart moves, one of them being the quiet purchase of a struggling 12-location diner chain 8 years ago. He'd saved it from collapse, overhauled the menu, and expanded into 3 states. But lately, things felt off. Reviews were slipping at one of his oldest locations, Store 3, a busy spot just outside Columbus. 3 customer complaints in 1 week, one about rude service, one about a long wait even though the place was half empty, and one that just said, "The girl at the front looked like she was about to cry." I felt horrible. Garrett never ignored patterns. He didn't want another filtered report from a district manager. He wanted to see it himself. He grabbed an old pair of sneakers, wore a fake name tag that read Tom, and slipped into a plain black polo. Nobody at this location had ever met him in person. They wouldn't recognize the owner of the company. All hiring was done by local managers. He'd made sure of that. When he arrived Monday morning, the GM, a middle-aged guy named Rick, barely glanced at him. "You the new trainee?" Rick asked, already halfway down the hall. "Yeah, Tom," Garrett said, keeping his voice low, "here to learn front of house." Rick handed him off to a server named Tito who looked exhausted but friendly. "Rick doesn't really train anybody," Tito muttered as they walked. "He just throws people in and waits to yell when they mess up." Garrett kept quiet and watched. The morning shift was light, but the tension in the air was thick. Staff moved fast, but no one talked much. Even the music playing overhead felt like it didn't belong. Then she walked in, probably 18 or 19. Tall, with nervous eyes and a messy brown ponytail, she looked like she'd barely slept. "Hey," she said to Tito. "I'm supposed to start today, hostess." "Madison, I think they wrote Maddie on the schedule." Rick appeared from the kitchen, already frowning. "You're late." I'm actually 10 minutes early," she said, checking her phone. "My paper said 11. Rick snatched the paper from her hand, scanned it, then waved her off. "Whatever. Get behind the stand. If you screw up, you're out." Garrett's jaw tightened. He watched Maddie step behind the hostess stand, shoulders stiff. She greeted customers with a soft smile, seated them with care, and even offered to wipe down a booster seat for a mom with a toddler. She was trying hard. But Rick kept hovering. By noon, the restaurant was packed, and Garrett noticed Rick wasn't doing anything. He didn't help with the rush, didn't ask if anyone needed support, just stood by the coffee machine watching. Then a couple walked in, obviously upset. Maddie greeted them. "Hi. Welcome, and do you have a— we've been calling since 10, no one picks up the phone," the woman snapped. "I'm really sorry about that," Maddie said, her voice cracking a bit. "If you'd like, I can seat you right now," Rick stormed over. "This is what happens when you don't do your job," Maddie blinked. "What? I've been up front the whole time." Rick turned to the couple. "I apologize, folks, she's new, clearly not trained right." I didn't," Maddie started, but Rick cut her off with a glare. "Go in the back now," he barked. Maddie froze. Her hands shook as she stepped away from the stand. Garrett saw her mouth tremble before she disappeared through the back door. A few seconds later, he caught a faint sound from the hallway, soft sobs. Garrett's stomach dropped. He stood still, heart pounding. He didn't know her. Had never met her before today. But something about the way she looked frightened, like she just stepped into something cruel, hit a nerve. He waited a beat, then turned to Tito. "Does that happen a lot?" Garrett asked quietly. Tito looked around, lowered his voice. "Rick's like that with anyone new. Especially girls. He blames them for stuff they didn't do just to scare him. Some last a day, some don't even make it to their first break." Garrett clenched his jaw. For a second, he doubted himself. Maybe he should have stepped in. Maybe he should have said something right there. But he stayed quiet. For now, Garrett waited until the lunch rush thinned before making his way toward the back hallway. He kept his expression unreadable, blending in like he had all morning. Near the utility closet, he found Maddie sitting on a broken step stool, wiping her cheeks with the sleeve of her oversized cardigan. Her apron was balled up in her lap and her eyes were red. He didn't approach right away. Instead, he leaned against the wall across from her and spoke evenly. "You all right?" Maddie startled, clearly not expecting anyone to speak to her. "I'm okay," she said quickly, pulling her sleeves over her palms. "I just needed a minute, I'll go back up." "You don't have to lie," Garrett said, his voice low. "You didn't do anything wrong." She hesitated, then looked up at him. "Does he always talk to people like that?" Garrett didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "Why'd you take this job?" Maddie blinked. "What? You could have worked anywhere. Why here?" She shrugged. "I needed something with mornings free. I take care of my younger brother before school. This shift worked." "And your first day's this," she nodded. Garrett pushed off the wall. "Come on, you're not going back out there alone." They walked back to the floor in silence. When they reached the front, Rick was nowhere to be seen. Tito was handling both tables and seating. Garrett took Maddie's apron from her hand and tied it around his own waist. "I'll cover the stand," he said. "Go shadow Tito for a bit." She stared at him. "Wait, don't worry about it." Maddie moved reluctantly to the floor and Garrett stepped behind the host stand, scanning the layout. The seating chart was out of date. One of the pens didn't work. The phone had a sticky note on it that said, "Don't answer, Rick will call back." He removed it quietly. A couple entered, then a family of 4. Garrett greeted them with a calm professionalism that felt foreign in the stiff air of the restaurant. He noticed Tito slipping glances toward the kitchen, clearly trying to avoid something or someone. 5 minutes later, Rick reappeared, sipping from a styrofoam cup and scrolling his phone. "Where's the girl?" he asked, not looking up. "She's helping on the floor," Garrett said without missing a beat. Rick finally looked up. "You're not trained for host." Garrett turned a page on the seating chart. "Neither is she, yet here we are." Rick narrowed his eyes. "You got an attitude?" Garrett didn't flinch. "No. Just watching the front like you told me to." Rick stared for another second, then walked off without a word. Garrett watched him disappear into the manager's office, then turned his attention back to the guests. By mid-afternoon, the team was showing signs of strain. One of the fryers went down, and the kitchen backed up fast. The server on the other wing, Chelsea, was trying to cover 4 sections. Tito was running food, drinks, and checks on his own. Garrett stepped in to help bus a few tables between seating guests. Chelsea dropped a tray of glasses on her way to the dish station. No one helped her. Garrett knelt, grabbed a towel, and started picking up shattered glass. "You're not kitchen," she said, startled. "Does it matter?" She gave him a look. "You're not like the others." "You knew, started today," Garrett replied. She nodded toward the office. "Watch your back with Rick. He doesn't like when people help each other, says it makes people lazy." Garrett's jaw tensed. He kept wiping. After cleanup, he circled back to Tito, who was at the coffee station refilling carafes. "You always short-staffed like this?" Garrett asked. Tito nodded without hesitation. "Rick cut a host position 2 weeks ago, said it saves payroll, then he cut the busser hours too. Said we should be able to handle it. What happens when people call off, we cover, or he threatens to write us up." Garrett paused. "How often's that happen?" "Weekly," Tito said. "Sometimes twice." Garrett looked back toward the kitchen. "And no one's called HR?" Tito gave a bitter laugh. "He tells people the hotline's fake. Says it just goes to a voicemail no one checks." Garrett said nothing. Later, while restocking menus near the front, Garrett overheard Rick talking with an older man sitting at table 7. The man wore a golf visor and a thick gold bracelet. "Your girl up front's cute," the man said, nodding toward Maddie. Rick chuckled. "She's new, probably won't last, quiet ones never do." The man leaned back. "You should have her wear something tighter, catch more tips that way." Rick laughed again. "That's the plan if she sticks around." Garrett froze. The menu he was holding went rigid in his hand. He turned, walked to the counter, and set the menus down with practiced calm. Then he walked straight toward the office. Rick was inside with the door cracked, typing something on a laptop. Garrett pushed the door open without knocking. Rick looked up. "You need something?" Garrett shut the door behind him. "Yeah, I need you to pack up your stuff." Rick blinked. "What?" Garrett reached into his back pocket and pulled out his real ID badge, the one that read Garrett Nolan, owner. Rick's face drained of color. "You're kidding." Garrett stepped forward. "You've been threatening staff, lying about HR, and just now you laughed while a customer talked about objectifying a teenage employee on her first day, and instead of shutting it down, you encouraged it." Rick stood up. "Hey, I didn't say anything like, 'Oh, you did,'" Garrett said. "And I heard every word, so did two guests at the bar." Rick's voice dropped. "Let's not be dramatic." Garrett's tone didn't change. "You're done. Turn over your keys. You'll get a formal notice from corporate. You're not stepping out of this office until you're off the clock." Rick looked like he wanted to argue, but Garrett's eyes didn't move. After a long beat, Rick reached into the drawer, pulled out a ring of keys, and dropped them onto the desk. Garrett didn't say another word. He opened the door, flagged Tito over, and handed him the keys. "Can you cover until I bring someone in?" Tito looked between the two men and nodded once. "Yeah." Rick grabbed his jacket, shoved past Garrett, and left the building without a word. Garrett stepped into the middle of the dining room. Maddie was quietly folding napkins at a side station. Chelsea was handing off a tray to a guest. The tension hadn't lifted yet, but there was a flicker of something new. A shift. Garrett looked around at the crew and said, loud enough for every table to hear, "For anyone wondering, Rick no longer works here. Anyone with concerns about how this place is run can come talk to me. I'll be here all week." The room went still. Maddie looked up at him, confused. Tito raised an eyebrow, then gave a small nod. Garrett walked back to the host's stand, took a breath, and finally sat down. His phone buzzed in his pocket, an email from corporate, probably asking for his afternoon availability. He didn't check it. Not yet. Garrett stayed until the last guest left. He helped wipe down tables, refilled napkins at the drink station, and restocked menus without drawing attention to himself. The team kept stealing glances, not quite sure what to make of him now, but no one asked questions directly. Not yet. By the time the dinner shift started rolling in, Garrett had stepped into the back office. He adjusted the chair too low and looked over the weekly schedule. It was worse than he thought. Multiple double shifts stacked on the same two people. No overlap during peak hours. No designated busser most days. He exhaled through his nose and picked up the phone. "Hey, it's Nolan," he said when the district HR rep answered. "Yeah, I'm at store 3. No, I'm not calling about reports. I'm calling because I just fired a GM and I need you down here tomorrow. We've got some patching up to do." He hung up and walked out just as Chelsea approached the office holding a worn-out binder. "Hey," she said. "Didn't mean to bother, but I figured if you're really staying for the week, you should know we haven't had a working closing checklist since June. It's all guesswork now." She set the binder on the desk and gave a short nod before heading back toward the floor. Garrett flipped it open. Pages were missing. Others were covered in scribbled notes, most written by different hands, some in pen, some in marker. One note just said, "We need gloves." Garrett leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. The smell of fryer oil clung to the walls. Outside the office, the place sounded the same: plates clinking, muted conversation, the shuffle of sneakers on tile. He stood up and stepped onto the floor again. Maddie was at the host stand, folding silverware into napkins. She didn't notice him approach until he stepped beside her. "You sticking around?" he asked. She looked over, unsure. "I guess I should," she said. "I don't want to leave the others hanging." Garrett nodded once. "You shouldn't have been left alone up here in the first place," she hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why'd you come in undercover? I mean, you're the owner. Couldn't you just walk in and ask questions?" Garrett looked out across the dining room. "I tried that. Years ago, people smiled, nodded, told me what they thought I wanted to hear. I didn't learn anything that way. I stopped trusting reports a long time ago." Maddie folded another napkin, slower this time. "So what happens now? You just do your job and I do mine." Chelsea passed by with a tray of drinks and paused briefly. "Can we get a new mop head sometime this year?" she asked dryly. "The current one smells like expired soup." "Make a list," Garrett said. "Tape it to the office door." She raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? Every shift, one list per day, top 3 things slowing you down. I'll look at them each night." She gave a small nod and moved on. By 9, the rush died down. Tito leaned on the counter near the pass window, rubbing his shoulder. Garrett approached him with a question. How long you been here? 2 years. You want to step up as interim floor lead? Tito blinked. What? Just until we bring in a new GM, Garrett said. You'll still run tables, but I want someone to monitor flow and help me spot the gaps. You've got the comm for it. Tito gave a cautious nod. All right, but just until the dust settles. It won't settle on its own. As Tito returned to his side of the floor, Garrett turned back to the host stand. Maddie was gone. He scanned the room. A moment later, he saw her near the side hallway, talking to a man in a dark gray hoodie. He was leaning too close, pointing at her name tag. Garrett's eyes narrowed. He moved toward them. The man's voice was low but sharp. You remember me now? No, I'm sorry, Maddie said, backing up slightly. I think you have the wrong person. He stepped forward. You're Maddie. You used to work at the Sonic on Main. You told my cousin he couldn't get a job there. Garrett stepped in between them. Is there a problem here? The man looked him up and down. Who are you? Her supervisor. This isn't a place for personal confrontations. She made my cousin look stupid in front of people, told him he wasn't dressed right for an interview. Garrett didn't blink. Then take it up with your cousin. You're not speaking to her again. Leave. The man looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Garrett's voice made him turn. He walked out without another word. Maddie's hands were shaking again. Garrett stood still, giving her space. Do you want to take 5? He asked. She shook her head. I'm okay, just didn't expect that. You handled it fine. Let me know if he comes back. Garrett returned to the office and scribbled a note for HR. Add security discussion to tomorrow's agenda. Front staff vulnerable. No current protocols. He stayed through final close. At 1 in the morning, Garrett locked the front doors himself. The last car pulled out of the lot. He stood alone in the quiet dining room, the hum of the soda machine the only sound. The next morning, HR arrived just after 8. A woman named Valerie stepped out of a compact car carrying a tablet and 2 binders. She looked around the lot before walking in. Garrett greeted her in the lobby. I need 2 hours, he said. I want each team member to speak freely. No interruptions. You'll need to ask about Rick, but also about scheduling, overtime threats, and retaliation. Valerie nodded. I've already opened a file. We'll need statements. Make it clear nothing will be held against them. She set up in the back office and began calling employees in one by one. Garrett stayed out of it, monitoring the floor. Maddie arrived around 10. She still looked wary but more collected than the day before. You're not on schedule today, Garrett said as she approached the host stand. I know, I just came in to say, thanks. For yesterday. You didn't have to come back for that. I wanted to. She glanced past him toward the office. Are they talking to people? Yes. Good. She turned to leave, then paused. I wasn't planning on staying here long, just needed a job to cover part of my brother's school fees. But if things really change, maybe I'll stick around. Garrett smiled faintly. Up to you, but if you ever feel unsafe again, talk to someone, don't wait. She nodded and walked out. By noon, Valerie stepped out of the office. 7 statements, she said, all align. I'm drafting a formal report. There's evidence of targeted intimidation, false timecard edits, and denial of breaks. Garrett sighed. We'll make it right. Also, Valerie added, 2 employees said guests made inappropriate remarks about their bodies in front of management. No action taken. Add it to the training protocol. I want 0 tolerance in writing. Front staff need protection. She nodded and returned to her notes. That night, Garrett sat with Tito and Chelsea in the break room. He laid out a printed version of the new schedule, no doubles. 1 weekend day off for everyone, and we're hiring for 3 positions: busser, host, and kitchen float. Chelsea looked at the paper. You actually found money to hire. I found money we were wasting. Tito folded his arms. You staying the whole week? Garrett nodded. I'll be here every day until it runs clean. Then I'll be back every month. No more disappearing. Chelsea leaned back. I'll believe it when I see it. You will, Garrett said, starting tomorrow. They sat in silence for a moment, then Chelsea tapped the table twice. "You changed the mop head yet?" Garrett smiled. "That's at the top of the list." She got up. "Good, because if I had to clean another spill with that thing, I was gonna light it on fire." Garrett stayed seated after they left, staring at the schedule. For the first time in a long time, it felt like things were starting to move in the right direction, not fast. Not easy, but finally forward. The next morning, Garrett arrived before sunrise and parked near the loading dock. The air was thick with early autumn fog and the smell of damp asphalt. He waited with the delivery crew, helping unload crates of produce and dry goods before the kitchen staff filtered in. The morning team didn't speak much at first, just exchanged nods and short greetings. But by the time the sun cracked over the roofline, a quiet rhythm had returned to the building. Garrett had spent the night reviewing payroll data and employee turnover for the past 18 months. What stood out wasn't just the volume of departures, it was the pattern. New hires, especially women under 25, rarely stayed beyond 2 weeks. Several had left after just one shift. He pulled each of their exit notes. Most were blank. A few said, "Not the right fit." One just said, "Didn't feel safe." By 8, Valerie from HR returned with 2 members of the compliance team. They took over the office to begin formal documentation. Garrett stayed out of their way. He moved table to table with the breakfast crew, walking the line, checking expiration dates, verifying everything against the inventory manifest. When the host for the morning shift arrived, a wiry young man with a quiet voice named Caleb, Garrett greeted him directly. "You were scheduled last week but didn't show," Garrett said. Caleb hesitated. "I tried to call out. Rick said if I did it again, I'd be dropped from the schedule. You're not on probation and you're allowed to be sick." Caleb didn't respond right away. Then he nodded faintly and went to prep the stand. By mid-morning, Garrett pulled Chelsea aside near the dish pit. "We're hiring," he said. "I want your help screening applicants." Chelsea raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want me doing that? You've been here longer than anyone else." "You've seen what happens when the wrong person's in charge. I trust your gut." She crossed her arms. "I don't do soft interviews. If someone's gonna fold under pressure, I want to know before they get a name tag." "That's exactly what I need." She gave a short nod and returned to the floor. Later, while restocking the supply shelf, Garrett caught a quiet interaction near the staff lockers. Tito had a shoulder brace on under his black uniform shirt. He was trying to lift a tray of bottled water when Maddie stopped him. "Just leave it. I'll get it." "I can manage," Tito muttered. "You said that yesterday and then dropped a whole rack of mugs." Garrett stepped in before either could respond. "Put it down," he said firmly to Tito. "If you're hurt, you're on modified duty." "I don't need, you do, and I'm logging it." Tito looked like he wanted to argue but didn't. He set the tray down and stepped back. Maddie glanced at Garrett. "He's been overdoing it since the day you showed up." Garrett nodded once. "That's stopping today." He walked the tray to the back himself, then returned to the floor. A little past noon, a candidate arrived for the open busser position. Garrett had Chelsea sit in on the interview while he monitored from the prep line. The applicant was a soft-spoken woman in her early 50s named Carmen. She answered every question clearly, but Chelsea pushed. "You ever worked a floor this size?" she asked. Carmen nodded. 5 years at her retirement center, I handled 3 wings solo." "You okay cleaning up after people who don't say thank you?" "I raised 4 kids, I don't need applause." Chelsea leaned back. "All right." "You might actually survive here." Garrett called her back after the interview. "What's your read?" he asked. "She knows how to work," Chelsea said. "And she doesn't flinch. That's enough for me." "Offer her the position. Start her Thursday." Chelsea nodded and disappeared down the hallway. That afternoon, Garrett visited the kitchen to talk with the line leads. There were 2 of them, David, who handled grill, and Anna, who ran expo. Both had been at the location for over a year, both under Rick's management. Garrett asked them to sit down at the prep table. "I'm not here to micromanage," he said, "but I need to know what you've been running short on." Anna didn't hesitate. "Prep time?" We're understaffed by one body every morning, David added, and freezer temps are inconsistent. We've logged it for months. Where are the logs? Anna pointed to a filing box beneath the dry rack. Garrett pulled it out, flipped through 5 sheets, and found the problem temp sheets signed but never reviewed. Rick had initialed all of them in the same pen. Garrett folded the top page and handed it to Valerie, who had joined him with a clipboard. This location's had a walk-in failure in the past, right? 2 years ago, she said. Reported loss of over $3,000 in product. Double-check the maintenance logs. If the same tech signed off both times, I want their license verified. Valerie jotted notes and stepped away. Back on the floor, Caleb was helping a guest with a high chair when a man in his 60s approached the counter. He wore a tan blazer and an old watch that flashed under the overhead lights. "You the manager now?" he asked Garrett. "Yes. Good, I've been coming here for 10 years. Last month, I saw a girl being screamed at in front of the entire dining room. Same girl's working here today." She still looks scared. Garrett watched the man's expression. He wasn't angry, he looked tired. "That won't happen again," Garrett said. The man nodded. "I'm glad someone finally showed up." He left a 20 on the counter and walked out without ordering anything. By closing, the atmosphere had shifted. People moved with purpose but not panic. Tito called orders calmly. Anna double-checked plating before the food hit the window. Maddie had stopped flinching every time the doorbell rang. In the break room, Garrett gathered the team after the last guest left. "I won't be here every day," he said. "But I'm not disappearing again. I'll visit unannounced. I'll read every employee report. And I've added a direct line to my office posted by the time clock." He handed out small envelope shift bonuses for every staff member who had worked the past 2 weeks without calling out during the chaos. Chelsea opened hers and gave a quiet nod. "You didn't have to." "I did," Garrett said. "You all kept this place standing when leadership failed." He turned to Maddie. "You got thrown into this place without backup and still showed up the next day. I want you to train the next host we hire." Her eyebrows rose. "Me, you know what not to do." "That's more valuable than any handbook." She looked around the room, then nodded lightly. Garrett addressed the group one last time. "This location's been running on fear for too long. That's done. We're rebuilding, from the floor up." No applause followed, no cheers. Just a quiet, grounded energy, the kind that comes when people finally believe someone means what they say. Garrett stayed behind after the team left, locking up the back door himself. The restaurant was silent now. Chairs stacked, lights dimmed, the last of the coffee dumped from the urns. He stood by the window and looked out at the empty lot. It wasn't fixed, not yet. But it wasn't broken anymore, and that was enough for now.